Ladies and gentlemen, my name's Paul, and in this Game Theatercom video we're going to be discussing the PlayStation 5 specifications. So, you may realise that my voice sounds a bit different. What the hell's going on? Well, it's very simple. I'm actually recording this on my cell phone, and then I'm going to be uploading this for Amy to edit. So, why am I recording this on my cell phone? Well, regular viewers know the answer. I am currently on holiday in the USA, so I'm going to be here for about another week and a half-ish. But I decided, because it's fairly early here at the moment, I wanted to cover this news because it's pretty interesting to me, and I suspect many of you would like to hear my opinions on it. So, this originates from Semi-Accurate, where Charlie over there has claimed that he has learned the specifications for the new console. Now, we don't have complete specifications, so we don't have information such as clock speeds or memory type, that type of thing, but it has been confirmed, and yes, you can use massive air quotations there, that it will be a Zen-based CPU. It's going to be 8 cores, and it will also be using the Navi, not Vega, Navi GPU architecture. So there's a couple of things. Firstly, let's focus on the CPU side of things. One will immediately make the assumption, well, that's 16 threads, right? Well, most likely, yes, SMT will be enabled, which would mean it would be quite the monster. There is also a couple of other possibilities. One, it's actually a 4-core processor, and it would have 8 threads total. So in other words, perhaps the source has been slightly wrong, or perhaps slightly misunderstood, and it is 4 cores, 8 threads, but once again, Charlie is claiming it is indeed an 8-core processor. There is also the small possibility that SMT would be disabled, and, you know, that could possibly be due to yield reasons, or power consumption, or perhaps even reducing the size of the die itself. For example, they could perhaps reduce some of the cache size, but I'm at the moment tentatively going to say it's 8 cores, 16 threads, which is an awful lot of thread performance for a console. We'll get to clock speeds in a moment. I want to go through an overview first. The second thing is it's Navi based. So we don't know too much about Navi, and that is putting it extremely mildly. Very quick overview of the current GPU architectures from AMD. We have Polaris. Polaris, of course, is found in the 400 series and the 500 series RX graphics cards. Then we have Vega, which is currently Vega 56 and 64 for the consumer side. And of course, we've got the new Frontier editions and all the other bits and pieces for the more professional market. We are looking at a 7nm Vega, which is supposedly going to be hitting the store shelves over the next several months for different markets. And then finally, we have Navi. So we don't know too much about Navi. We do know it's going to be a scalable architecture. Now, what that means, we're not too sure. It could simply mean that it's going to be a lot easier for AMD or their customers, meaning Sony, Microsoft, whomever, to decide to basically build the GPU in a very Lego-like fashion. To put it into another context, you could almost think of it as something like Zen, but that's just speculation on my part. There's not been enough evidence to tell us one way or the other. The other thing we do definitely know is it's going to have next generation memory. Being realistic with you, there's a couple of options. There's low power HBM, there's HBM3. HBM2 would not qualify because obviously it's no longer next generation. And finally, there's GDDR6. My bet, because once again, consoles, you know, plus HBM probably not exactly cost efficient, and that's putting it mildly. Most likely we're going to see the inclusion of GDDR6, which means of course memory can run at much higher clock speeds, which means that even at a narrower memory bus, let's say the same as the PlayStation 4 or even the Xbox One vanilla, which is 256-bit, because memory is running much faster, we're going to see of course much faster memory transfer speeds and much higher amounts of bandwidth total. One would make the assumption, however, that we will be looking at either Zen Plus or possibly a Zen 2 based processor. So according to this article, we could be looking at the PlayStation 5 hitting store shelves in around 2018, at least the holidays of 2018, or most likely to 2019. Most analysts don't predict it's going to be that close though, and Michael Pachter, as usual, has made some speculations and he doesn't believe it's going to be until 2020. Don't forget that developers now actually have access to the development kits, which is obviously a very critical step. Now, these development kits could potentially have some differences between the final retail builds and, once again, the development kits, because ultimately the development kit to the retail build might slightly morph. There might be lower clock speeds or higher clock speeds or different amounts of compute units or memory changes or whatever. but as a general rule of thumb, it will be within the target specifications of the final performance of the machine. Now this is complete speculation upon my part, so do not take these as what Charlie is telling us. This is pure speculation. But I believe the next Xbox, assuming they do make a physical device, which I think they probably will, at least for one more generation, will be very similar in specifications to the PlayStation 5. Maybe they might make a few concessions here, a few concessions there, but I would say within the realms of sticking with AMD, probably Zen, all of that stuff, that's going to remain consistent. As for the CPU, there's a couple of options. We're looking at Zen Plus, or Zen 2. I don't know if we're going to see Zen 2 if we see 2018 launch. In fact, I think it's highly unlikely. Therefore, we're probably going to be looking at a Zen Plus based architecture, but whether we're going to see a 7nm or a 12nm based APU, and let's just be honest, it probably will be an APU, well, we'll just have to remain on the fence. Personally, I don't think the PlayStation 5 is going to be released this year, just simply because of how Navi is still far behind in development, at least according to the rumours. I don't think it's going to happen until 2019, so if you were thinking about picking up a PlayStation 4 in the next couple of weeks, I would still pick one up. We also hear from Charlie that it's developed with VR optimizations in mind. And honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if the GPU also was built with next generation techniques such as ray tracing. Yes, of course, we know that DXR is very much used as the poster child for ray tracing when it comes to video games, but Vulkan and other APIs are more than capable of doing this, and because most low-level APIs, if you're talking in a very general kind of consensus, are very similar in technique. The last thing to remember, and this one's probably the most important, when it comes to release dates, ultimately the PlayStation 4 is not selling bad, and that's putting it as a massive understatement. In fact, if you really think about it, it would make way more sense for Sony to wait a year or two when developers have gotten to the point where it's pretty much maxed out the machine. After all, the PlayStation 4 Pro is certainly giving an extra bit of leg power to developers, but also that they feel that market saturation is to the point where it's not necessarily not selling, but, you know, the sales figures are no longer as astounding as what they are currently. There's a lot of other speculation we could discuss as well, such as whether it's going to be 4K capable. Of course it will be. Whether all games are going to be 4K, 60 FPS, I doubt it, because ultimately they're going to need to give flexibility to developers. Like, if a developer just says, hey, you know what, we just don't really need 60 FPS for our game, we would rather it look more visually impressive. Or perhaps the developer is not going to be a stickler, perhaps they're going to push more dynamic resolution, or whatever. It's totally going to be down to the developer. As for memory quantity, it's most likely going to be 16 gigabytes of RAM. By the way, in case you're wondering why I'm jumping around topics, normally I write down a list, but unfortunately I'm just basically doing a cell phone, so it's semi, off the top of my head. And I'm going to give a couple of closing thoughts. I do feel that it's going to be a more mobile-orientated APU, so we're not going to see, like a ridiculously high clock speed. It's not going to be like 4.4 gigahertz. But if we compare the IPC gains and the, architecture, general improvements on not just the IPC of the CPU, but also the GPU, we take into account the fact that the clock speed of both is going to probably be higher. Even, and this is being rather conservative, but let's be conservative just for a moment, the PS4 base model has a clock speed of 1.6 GHz for its 8 CPUs, the PlayStation 4 Pro I meant to say the Xbox One 1.75 GHz, and the PS4 Pro hits around 2.13 GHz for its CPU. So obviously, if we're increasing the IPC of what the CPU can do, adding in those additional threads, and finally, of course, the IPC gains of going to the Ryzen architecture, you can definitely see how there's going to be a considerable CPU boost, and that is definitely one of the things that's holding back currently the PS4. Actually, I was even going to say the Xbox One X as well, despite the fact that it does have a considerably higher clock speed advantage than even the PS4 base model. It's still definitely the lower and weaker element of the Xbox One X as well, so having that additional clock speed, having that additional performance available for developers is certainly going to be beneficial. With all of that said, apologies for kind of a impromptu video, but I did want to give my opinions on this because I've already had a couple of social media messages, so I just figured it would be best to do so. I'm going to put out the odd other video. There are going to be some vlogs coming up. This is slightly off topic, so you can, run away now if you desire. I am still in Seattle, as I've said like 100 times now. So there's going to be a couple of really touristy stuff. Yesterday I spent the day at the beach, but I was there with a friend and her daughter, so I couldn't film that for obvious reasons. She doesn't want, the kid broadcast to lots of people, and I don't blame her at all. But there will be some other stuff that I'm going to be doing over the next few days and doing some exploring by myself. So, hopefully you have enjoyed the video. Normal stuff, like, share, subscribe. If you're a new viewer, it's normally not quite this chaotic. But once again, it's a bit difficult at the moment for me because, just how everything's going. But I will be back in the UK pretty soon anyway, and then there's going to be a lot of work put into the channel. But with all of that said, hopefully you're all doing absolutely wonderful. I miss you all. It's still kind of weird to not be, producing content on a daily basis, but it's been really good for me mentally. So I'm looking forward. It's weird. Like, I'm enjoying myself a lot in the States, and I really am. I'm looking forward to kind of living here permanently. But, and I know this is going to sound crazy, I really miss you all, and I really miss putting out content. So, anyway, hopefully you're all okay. Bye for now.